Okay. Hi. So I came across something very interesting. So I thought of sharing with all of you. I recently purchased a hosting plan on which I also created a free domain called abhinav.com. Basically, wanted to experiment the whole life cycle of purchasing a hosting, purchasing a domain name, integrating domain name with the hosting, and to be able to deploy any of your website onto this hosting plan. Now, what I want to show you today is how we can create a subdomain and we can auto deploy a website under a subdomain. What I mean by that is I have purchased a website called abhinav.com. So Abhinav is the handle that I keep using for different accounts. So it's easy, short, and I got that. So my personal email is abhinav.com, abhynav. So I recently purchased a hosting a domain, and together with that, I got this free domain, abhinav.com, so which I purchased that. Now, if I go to abhinav.com, I think, yeah, I mean, it is just going to a default landing page. But what I wanted to show you was how we can create a subdomain. So I created a subdomain called Advait. And on this, I have published a simple web page. This could be a full-fledged web page with Advait. So I wanted to show you how we can do that and how we can do a auto deployment pipeline for this website to this subdomain. Okay, so let's create a new one. Let's create a subdomain called Siddhant, and let's create a website for Siddhant and see how we can push this to my hosting a domain. So I think it's worth kind of explaining how this whole thing links together in a diagram. So we have Hostinger over here, and on Hostinger we have connected our domain called abhinav.com. Okay, what I want is another website under this called Siddhant. Now, how can we do that? Now, I want to create my website onto local, let's say VS Code. And this is my development environment. So what essentially I want, I will create a website in VS Code, and I want to push it directly to Hostinger, which means that any changes that I do should be auto-detected and populated to Hostinger. How we can do that? Now, in order to do that, let us first we have to create two things. First, we have to create a local project. Then we have to create a repository in Git. We can connect our VS Code to Git using git push command, and then Git repository I'll connect through Hostinger using a feature of Hostinger called auto deployment. Okay, so first I will create a number one, I will create a GitHub repository. I'll create a local repository. So this is number one I will do. Number two, I will create a local repository. Number three, I will create a subdomain. And then I will show you how I can just do a git push over here. And whatever changes I have made to my website on my local VS Code gets directly published to my subdomain on my main domain. Now, what is the use of this? Why I was experimenting with all this? Most of our students are taking web development courses. We also want them to publish their profiles onto somewhere live hosting. Right now, what they are doing is through GitHub subdomain. They are publishing under either GitHub or Replit. We want to have something like www.sanketna.com/Arush. Okay, so that Arush will be pointing to Arush GitHub repository, basically his website in GitHub repository. And this whole thing will be automatic in the sense that whenever he publishes any changes to his website, it will be published under our subdomain. Later, once he purchases something like www.arish.com, he can simply follow the same process and his website will be hosted under arish.com. Okay, so let's move on. 1 second. I'll just take a screenshot of this. Okay, so point number 1, let's go to our GitHub and create a new repository. Let's call that Siddhant homepage. No H. Okay, and leave everything default and create a repository. What this has done, it has created an empty repository in my GitHub. So I can also copy these steps, which says create a new repository on command line. So I'll be using this step to create a corresponding repository on my local laptop. So let's go over here, open my VS Code. I can just create a new. Let me just close the old one. Close folder. Create a new folder. Let's call that Siddhant. Okay. Now you've opened a new folder in VS Code. Go to the terminal, and whatever command we have copied from over here, our GitHub, I can paste it over here. Okay. Now what has happened? A new Git repository is created in my local, and this is connected to remote GitHub. I can go here also create my index.html. And I'll use the creator. This is Siddhant's homepage. I save it and I say git add dot git commit minus sam first commit. Now explaining git commands is beyond the scope of this tutorial, so we can take that later. And once you have done, then we can git push minus u origin main. And essentially what I've done with these 3 commands is I've taken this change, committed it, and pushed it to my Git repository. Now, if I refresh here, whatever I've created in my local, I can see over here, index.html. Okay, now what I want to do, I want to publish this page, which is on Git, into my Hostinger. So let's go to Hostinger. Go to home. Okay, and then we can save file manager. So you might also see there is something called as public HTML. Now, public HTML will contain, it is the main root folder in which you'll be creating the index HTML of your home page. Now, if you want to create something underneath it, you have to create a subfolder. So we can create a subfolder over here, saying new folder. Let's call that Siddhant. That's it. Now, whatever the content, the index.html need to go and sit here. We can simply as well say upload file, and if you put it here, it will start getting reflected here. But the problem with that is every time you need to go and upload the file, and you cannot give access to this Hostinger account to individual student. So what we want to do, students to be able to push to their Git repository, and pushing the Git repository will trigger a automatic deployment onto Hostinger. So let's see how this is done. Now come back to, where is it? Yeah. Now let's search for Git, and here it is. So we can create a new repository, and we can configure a deployment and automatic deployment. So this I've already done for other one. Let's do it for Siddhant. So for this, I need the Git URL. So this Git URL you will find in your Git repository. So you'll find it under code, copy, go back, paste it under here, and branch need to be main. Okay, you can also see it over here. What is the name of our branch? It is main. And then directory we have already created. We'll call that Siddhant and create. Now it is created. Now if I go to www.abhinav.com Siddhant, sorry. Okay, I'm getting this. This is Siddhant homepage. How did it come? Okay, yeah, because I deployed it already. Now, what I want change this text to Siddhant's new homepage. Okay, and I want it to get reflected automatically over here. So one way to do it is I change it over here. See this, that's Siddhant homepage version 1. I can save it. I can say git commit git add dot git commit -m second commit git push -u origin main. Okay. Now, if I refresh here, no, I don't see the new changes. I need to redeploy. Okay, I need to deploy it over here again under this. Okay, you can also see the build output. So if I refresh, hopefully I should get this version 1. Now in Git, there is something called as event triggers. So we can say that whenever a student performs this git push on local, the changes should get automatically deployed in Hostinger. Now, how do we do that? It's something called, as you might have seen already, auto deployment. Now let's try to do that. Say auto deployment, and it gives you two links, something called as webhook URL and something called as webhook on GitHub. So basically you have to add this link to this link. So again, webhook is beyond the scope of this discussion, but in general, webhook is a way of catching events using APIs. Sometimes it is also called as reverse APIs. Okay. So for example, if my payment got failed, I can invoke another API. So let's go over here and one second. How come it's already coming pre-filled? 15. Okay, I think this was the previous one I created. I add this payload URL. Everything else I remain like this. I said add. Okay. Okay. So that's it. Now let's change it to version 2. I want to change this to version 2. Suppose student is working on his homepage and he has hosted his homepage under Sanketna subdomain, and he is making changes to his website, and his changes that he is doing on his local should be automatically reflected on his subdomain under Sanketna. What he can do, he's working on his local, he can just say version 2, save it, git add dot git. These are some standard steps for pushing to git. Commit -m, second commit, or say version 2, git push you origin main. That's it. Hold on. No, there was spelling mistake I did. It's origin. Okay, so it is transferred to my git. So now the changes has gone to, first of all, to git. So if I see here, so it says version 2, and if I go over here, great. So I hope you found this interesting. We can maybe take up a separate session if you're interested more into how to host your website on Hostinger and how to set up automatic deployments from your local VS Code via GitHub to your Hostinger hosting. Thank you. Bye-bye.